Now, as I'm sure most of you are aware, I own more football boots than probably anybody should, but what's funny about that is that was never a goal of mine when I first started SR4U back in 2011. I just wanted to review boots and give my brutally honest opinion on them, but as SR4U continued to grow and I gained access to more and more football boots and releases definitely became more frequent, football boots started to accumulate, and that accumulation eventually turned into what is now what I call my football boot collection. But what's interesting about my collection in particular is that almost every single boot that I have, I've actually made a video on, which is why there are so many videos on this particular channel. But through organizing the SR4U boot room, which I'm currently in the process of doing, update on that coming soon, I came across one pair of boots that out of the 99% of boots that I have made videos on, there are still a few that I haven't, and this is one of them. I've had these boots for 6 years, and I never made a video until today. Let me show you what they are. God, I hate boxes like this. It is this, the Lights Out Nike CTR 360 Maestri 3. Now, I'm sure a bunch of you guys have fond memories of the Maestri 3. I know I do, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are looking at this boot and saying to yourself, this is the most boring colorway. It's just a blackout. But this is actually the most limited of the Maestri 3s, limited to only 2,500 pairs worldwide, each individually numbered. And it's also one of the most unexpected limited edition drops Nike has ever done. Let me explain. Welcome to another retro review reboot video where we take an older boot, good or bad. We go over all the technical information, reflect on what it represented at the time, and even compare it to what would be the equivalent model in today's football boot market. You guys seem to be loving the series so far, which is great because I really do enjoy making these videos and talking boot history in general. So if you enjoy this one and want to see the series continue, don't forget to support this video with a like. And if you don't want to miss out on everything football boots in terms of content on the channel, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Check out this kick flip. If you don't subscribe after that, I don't know. As far as packaging and extras go, it's hard to look this stuff up, so I'm going off of memory, but I'm 99% sure that this was the only limited edition colorway release of the CTR 360 Maestri 3, which means that it didn't come in the normal orange Nike box. Instead, it came in this black drawer style box, which literally just has a small Nike swoosh on the top. It has nothing along the sides, which I thought was kind of weird. And there's a quick look at the label for anybody that's curious. Open up the drawer and you'll find on the inside, of course, the boots themselves. And because it is a top-end model, they did also include a string bag, which has been kept very simple, like the blackout colorway itself. Black on black with the CTR 360 logo and Nike swoosh on the front. Nothing on the back. It gets a string bag rating of 49 out of 64. 0.1. Now, as for the boots themselves, just to give you guys a quick history lesson, the CTR 360 line from Nike is the world's first control boot, which I realize that the marketing term doesn't really mean all that much at the end of the day, but to the average consumer, it's kind of an explanation as to what each football boot is designed for, and obviously people read into that maybe a little bit more than they should. But up until that point in time, the original CTR 360 Maestri 1 coming out in 2009, we had power boots, we had speed boots, and we had heritage boots, which were basically just simple leather boots, kind of the old school control boot, if you will. But obviously now, control boots are a very common thing to see in the football boot industry, and the CTR 360 was so influential that if you look at the Adidas Predator series, one of the longest running series of football boots in human history, it was at one point a power boot. It is now branded as a control boot. The CTR 360 is the reason why that's the case. Fast forward to 2012 and Nike would launch the third generation of the CTR 360 Maestri, which was a pretty big design change from the first two generations, obviously still featuring the signature Kanga-Lite upper, but one that was hugely refined, and honestly, this was just the best version of Kanga-Lite we've ever had on a pair of football boots. The control element, if you will, through the midfoot was significantly larger this time around and broken up into 8 individual rubber fins. And perhaps most importantly, and the biggest impact that this boot had on the entire Nike brand, even to this day, is that the Maestri 3 was the first ever football boot from the Nike brand to incorporate ACC, all conditions control technology. Now I realize at this point I've done my fair share of poking fun at ACC technology, and I stand by everything that I've said up until this point, but funny and true story regarding this particular boot and ACC technology is that I was actually at Nike World Headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon for the launch of this particular tech and this particular boot. And honestly, it was a really cool moment for me. I was basically 1 year into doing SR4U, and to get an invite from Nike to an event like that, totally unreal, unbelievable experience. I'll never forget it. So we sat through this long presentation of basically everything technical about the boot, but eventually they gave us some boots, put us out on a field that was one of the nicest fields I've ever played on, and had us test out the boots as well as the effectiveness of ACC technology. And I have to assume that they had a sprinkler system or at least some way of watering this particular pitch, where ideally, I think if you just made the pitch wet, we could all see how good ACC was. But instead, because it was a really sunny day, what they decided to do was give us these spray bottles full of water, had us literally spray the boots, and then do a bunch of these little drills to see the effectiveness of ACC. And in my defense, because you can go back and watch some of these older videos, and I sang the praises of ACC technology, especially when they first rolled out that ACC pack. But I still stand by this particular point. When ACC was originally rolled out, not just on the Maestri 3, but on all the top-end models from Nike, all of the ACC-specific models actually had some variation to the upper, where it had this slightly gritty texturing to it, which I still feel today, taking these out for the first time in a while, where over time, as ACC technology became a more standardized feature on Nike top-end models, that very similar texturing across the board with all the different uppers has just pretty much completely gone away at this point. So while I think ACC isn't nothing, I don't think it's nearly, again, as I've said many times before, as important as a lot of people believe it to be. You know how the old saying goes, they just don't make ACC like they used to. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned that the release of this boot was extremely unexpected. And the reason why that is because specifically on March 6th, 2014, Nike unveiled the replacement for the CTR 360 Maestri 3, which happened to be an extremely popular boot, arguably the most influential of the last decade, the Nike Magista Obra 1. Now, normally, when a new boot comes out, the old model is done. They don't make any more colorways. The production has stopped a long time ago. That's it. What you got is what you got. But for whatever reason, they unveiled this in early March, and then on April 4th, 2014, almost 1 month later, Nike unveils this, a limited edition blackout colorway of the CTR 360 Maestri 3, dubbed Lights Out. Basically, their send-off for the CTR 360. This is basically the RIP Maestri 3 colorway. Now, the reason why I never made a video on these is not because I didn't get them as soon as they came out, but it's because you have to remember there was so much hype around the Magista Obra 1, and then shortly after this, Nike would unveil the Superfly 4, which people were equally as excited about. And when Nike actually released this particular boot, all the retailers sold out because there were only 2,500 pairs, but it was a pre-order item, so they didn't actually ship out, at least where I got them from, until like 2 or 3 weeks later. So it wasn't until a month after this was even unveiled, 2 months into the life cycle of the Magista Obra 1, that I actually got a pair. And at that point in time, nobody really cared about the CTR 360 Maestri 3, so I just never made a video. Obviously, some time has passed since then, so the question is the Maestri 3 still a good pair of football boots? And I think the answer to that question has to be yes. This is actually a boot that in particular has aged extremely well, where I really feel like Nike could add this boot as is to their current lineup, and it would hold up against everything that they have right now. It is that good of a football boot, and honestly, I'm sure I'm not alone in saying this. I wish Nike would do something again using this Kanga-Lite material for an upper. I know we technically have it in the Phantom Venom takedown model, the Pro specifically, but it's more of a thin, almost Tajin synthetic type of Kanga-Lite versus this, which is a lot more leather-like in terms of having a padded feel. Now, for those that don't know, Kanga-Lite, you can see the branding right there, is not kangaroo leather. It's a synthetic that is designed to feel as much like kangaroo leather as possible. And at this point in time with the Maestri 3, it had evolved to a point where they actually got pretty close. It's super soft, it's super flexible. Obviously, unlike leather, it's not going to stretch nearly as much, which is why there isn't a lot of stitching to this particular boot. There is enough structure to the synthetic material itself. And then obviously, because it's not leather, it doesn't require any maintenance. It's not going to dry out. It's not going to absorb as much water. It's a little bit lighter to begin with. That at least was the benefit of Kanga-Lite back in the day that Nike was promoting. And honestly, it's a really nice upper. You can see it has some texturing here on the lateral side. The objective of that was to kind of pair with the ACC technology to make sure that you didn't have any water sitting on the surface of what would normally be a flat upper. So that was the logic there. Obviously, this was a control boot from Nike, and what they did with the CTR 360 models and pretty much carried over into the Magistas as well is they created this off-centered lacing system where they were actually pushed to the medial side, kind of the opposite direction of where you would normally see it. And the idea there was to create, again, a super clean surface to make contact with the ball for optimal control. They got rid of the memory foam pads in favor of just straight Kanga-Lite, which makes for a less bulky boot, which again, I think makes more sense for what people like in modern football boots these days. And then looking at the medial side, the CTR 360s always had some kind of rubber element here for control. The Maestri 3 kind of made it a little bit bigger, breaking it up into 8 of these pieces where you can see they're kind of smooth towards the middle. And then there's these little kind of laser 3, laser 4 like nubs on the outer ones, kind of trying to create this cupping like effect, kind of a perfect place for the ball to make contact. And they're made out of rubber. There's a little bit of additional grip there. Kind of takes some getting used to, honestly. It's more effective than you think it would be, but still a really cool way of incorporating some extra grip without adding much in the way of extra weight or bulk on the upper. Obviously, the boot does have a low cut design to it. Internally, the heel liner is a nice synthetic leather material, plenty of padding. I'll give you guys a quick look at the insole as well for those that are curious. Pretty straightforward though. It is a synthetic leather lining on the surface, which we really don't see for many football boots anymore. Obviously has a little bit of texturing here through the forefoot, and then it's made from a single layer of this perforated yellow foam. Very solid quality, I have to say. And then moving to the sole plate and stud pattern, it's a really thin plastic material that they've used that actually has some decent structure to it, although very similar to what would carry over onto the Magista Oprah 1 in regards to feel. And then as far as the stud pattern goes, I really like this layout from Nike. It's kind of similar to what we would see or still see on the Tiempos, but you can see that they went for more of a bladed style stud on the lateral side and then more of like a half moon rounded style stud on the medial side. And the reasoning for that was that when you're kind of pushing off and accelerating, you are going to dig in on the outside of your foot, so you want a more aggressive blade. But then when you're kind of on your toes, twisting and pivoting, you want the rounder stud to allow for kind of freedom to pivot. It just makes things a little bit easier. Does that really work in practice? It's difficult to say, but as a stud pattern in terms of feel and overall performance, it's really good. Also, for those that will say that this is so much better looking than the boots Nike makes now, I'm just gonna leave this here. It's actually shocking how similar they look from the side. And then finally, there's the weight. And the Maestri 3 was kind of right at that tipping point in the football boot market where everything started getting lighter and lighter. So it's not a heavy boot, but it's not as light as I think it would be now if Nike decided to make something similar in terms of style. So I'm gonna weigh them for you. This is a size 9.5 US. You can see on the scale, they weigh in at 8.2 ounces, the equivalent of 232 grams, which is by no means a heavy pair of football boots, but if we compare this to all the current top-end models from the Nike brand, it technically would be the heaviest one by about half an ounce. Now, because the Maestri 3 had so many amazing colorways, I couldn't just show you the blackout pair because it kind of hides a lot of the design. So I have them here in the launch yellow, black, and white colorway. This is actually the pair that Nike gave to me to try at Nike World Headquarters. I don't have a lot of the football boots that I reviewed and tested back in those days, but these are some that I definitely hung on to and obviously still have. So on feet, Maestri 3 still feels really good. I'll be honest with you guys. The Kanga-Lite upper It's not like the nicest leather that you can get on some Mizuno boots, and honestly even some boots from Nike and Adidas, but it's still really nice, and once these are worn in a little bit, it softens up to the point where it definitely could fool people into believing that it is actually a leather upper. The comfort and touch is really nice, and again, the fact that it's not leather and it has a little bit more structure to it means that the boots are a lot more responsive than a lot of other pure leather football boots would be. You don't feel the rubber element here running through the midfoot, but it's very noticeable in terms of additional grip on the ball. As far as overall fit is concerned, it has a nice snug fit. It kind of tapers a little bit towards the toe box, more so than what you have now on the Control boots from the Nike brand in the form of the Phantom Vision, but not too far off the overall shape of the Magista Obra 1, for those that remember how those fit. So width-wise, as long as you don't have super wide feet, especially in the toe box, you shouldn't have too many issues. And as far as sizing is concerned, they do run a little bit snug because of that tapered toe box. I'd say about a quarter size small. I'm wearing them here in a size 9.5 US, and I could probably do with a 10 if I'm being completely honest with you guys. But if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I'd recommend going true to size if you want a really tight fit. If you want them to have a little bit of room, going a half size up wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. Now, like we talked about earlier, CTR 360 turned into Magista, which eventually turned into Phantom Vision. So the modern day equivalent of this boot right here would be the Nike Phantom Vision 2 Elite, which begs the question, which one is better? Now, feel free to leave your own personal opinions down below in the comments, because I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer to this. They're both really good football boots, but my trouble in comparing these two is that, yeah, they're technically both football boots, yeah, they're technically both Control boots, but it's not really like an apples to apples comparison. It's like an apples to sock comparison, because they are very different in so many ways. Where I think they're similar is they both kind of play around with extra grip in texturing. This obviously just has tons of texture on the upper, where this, of course, has the grittiness of early day ACC technology, as well as this control element here on the medial side. They're both low cut for the most part. They are both very comfortable football boots, so they're similar in that regard. And the stud patterns, I guess, despite being fairly different, actually feel and perform pretty similar to each other. They're also not that far off in terms of overall weight. Where I think these two are very different is in regards to touch. This is more along the lines of modern day sock boot, which you either love or hate at this point. Most people seem to like it. And from a comfort standpoint, I think that this is an excellent pair of football boots, where the Kanga-Lite on the Maestri 3 is more along the lines of classic leather. But again, if I'm being totally honest, I think that real leather is still better than Kanga-Lite. This was just cool as an overall package in terms of what it represented and what it had on offer. So if I had to pick between these two boots, if I'm being honest, being somebody that tends to prefer something with a slightly more padded touch rather than a thinner touch, I think I would actually prefer the CTR 360 Maestri 3, but I don't necessarily think that it's a better football boot than what we have now in the form of the Phantom Vision. Anyways, guys, that's it for me in this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. If you have any questions or suggestions for other boots you'd like to see a retro review of, leave that down below in the comment section, and I take a look at everything you guys have to say. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Kickflip. So sick.